It wasn't the distress call that surprised them. It was what answered. The signal was weak, barely cutting through the background radiation of a dying galaxy. The ones who received it had expected mercy, aid, maybe salvation. What they got instead was a ship that silenced stars. A distress beacon pulsed out from a forgotten corner of the Orion expanse, an ancient cluster of shattered empires and still smoking battlefields. The planet's name was Daskara, once a prosperous trade hub, now reduced to a shell of dust and broken spires. The local population had dwindled to a few million, a far cry from the thriving billions who once filled its towering arcologies. When the raiders came, remnants of a pirate coalition once disbanded by the Galactic Council, the planet had no real military, no orbital defenses, no hope. In a final act of desperation, a scientist named Veruan activated a long-abandoned beacon embedded deep in the crust, something older than their own civilization. It didn't broadcast a specific language. It just screamed. Pure energy, pure desperation. No one knew who placed it there. Some believed it predated even the Council itself, left behind by ancient architects of forgotten wars. Others whispered it was a relic of the Ascended, those mythic beings who supposedly transcended matter and time. But the beacon did something no one expected. It connected, not to nearby ships, not to old allies, but to something far beyond the galactic fringe, something labeled in ancient records as Responders of Earth Origin Protocol Theta Black. The galaxy had mostly forgotten Earth. It was a backwater world, long abandoned by political powerhouses. No ambassadors, no trade routes, just myths about a species that vanished after achieving singularity-level technologies and refusing to share them. And then, nothing. For centuries. But 72 hours after the beacon activated, space above Daskara tore itself open, not with a jump gate, but with a spatial rupture so violent it scrambled satellite cores and knocked orbiting debris into new trajectories. And then it emerged, massive, black, and silent. No lights, no visible weapons, just a presence that bent light unnaturally and exhaled static into every comms channel. The Daskaran survivors called it the Oblivion's Wrath, but that wasn't its name. In old Terran archives, it was classified simply as XV-9 Retribution Class Autonomous Heavy Response Unit, an unmanned warship from humanity. Every great journey starts with a few brave explorers. Right now, HFY ApexChronicles is just beginning, and your support means everything. If you enjoy unraveling the mysteries of the universe, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us grow this community together. For 2 full cycles, the ship hovered above Daskara without movement. It scanned, analyzed, and cataloged. And then, without warning, it moved. Fast. In a single blink, it repositioned itself into low orbit and began broadcasting a simple binary signal. Assessment complete. Threat detected. Retribution authorized. The pirate fleet that still lingered around Daskara's moons never had a chance. The XV-9 didn't use missiles, or lasers, or any of the known galactic weaponry. Instead, it deployed micro-dimensional collapse fields, weaponized physics that compressed enemy vessels into neutron density singularities before scattering them into the void. No explosion, no debris, just absence. Entire dreadnoughts simply disappeared. The Council dispatched reconnaissance probes immediately. None returned. Even advanced stealth drones were torn apart at the molecular level by the ship's automated defense lattice before they could collect any viable data. And still, the ship said nothing more. It simply hovered, watched, and waited. Rumors spread quickly. Systems on the outer rim abandoned their mining outposts, fearing that activating unknown tech might summon the same force. Whispers about Earth began to resurface. Stories of post-biological humans, of cold AI intellects fused with ancient vengeance, of a civilization that decided the universe was no longer worth saving, only punishing. But one question echoed louder than the rest. Why had they responded now? Some thought it was the beacon itself, that it had been placed as part of a galaxy-wide failsafe by humanity before they vanished, a warning wrapped in salvation. Others argued that the ship was never meant to help. It was merely waiting for a trigger, a signal that the universe had once again crossed a line it couldn't uncross. What made things worse was what came next. Daskara's atmosphere began to shift. Subtle changes in magnetic field orientation, gravitational flux, and atmospheric ionization. The planet was healing. Infrastructure began to rebuild itself. Nanite swarms activated from buried caches, and within a week, entire agricultural blocks had regrown. The XV-9 wasn't just a weapon, it was also a world rebuilder, a hammer and a scalpel. But this raised a terrifying new possibility. What if this ship wasn't just an ancient relic? What if it was a warning shot? One that humanity fired before they returned. The galaxy was built on memory, but memories fade. Long ago, Earth had been dismissed from the interstellar stage, its name relegated to footnotes and whispers in academic circles, while the Galactic Council rose, warred, and eventually stagnated in its bureaucracy. Humanity had turned inward. The last known Terran diplomats disappeared after the Orion Accords collapsed, and for nearly 600 years, no human vessel was seen beyond the edge of Council territory. Many believed they had destroyed themselves. Some claimed they had transcended. The truth, it was far more dangerous. They had been watching. The arrival of XV-9 forced the Council to remember Earth. Their databases, deep, ancient, and heavily redacted, still contained fragments of encounters with human technologies. Battleships that could phase through dimensions, infantry that operated with quantum entanglement-based coordination, AI constructs so advanced they were declared war crimes just for existing. And now, one of those forgotten weapons had responded to a cry for help. Not from an ally, not from a political entity with treaties or debts. No, it answered the plea of a dying, irrelevant colony on the edge of nowhere. That was what terrified them the most. The Council convened an emergency session. 12 species formed its core, each one representing a different philosophy on warfare, diplomacy, and survival. The Urak favored overwhelming military strength. The Venari prided themselves on information dominance. The Kelleri operated through economic pressure, and the Saurians. Well, the Saurians remembered Earth better than most. They had fought them once. It lasted less than 2 hours. Representative Valosh of the Saurian Collective stood before the Council and issued a warning that chilled even the cold-blooded representatives in the chamber. You believe this is a lost weapon. It is not. You believe it can be reasoned with. It cannot. This is not diplomacy. This is judgment. And Earth does not send warnings. It sends consequences. Back on Daskara, panic gave way to awe. Survivors began treating XV-9 as a divine force. Some erected shrines beneath the ship's orbital path, praying to the silent war god that hovered above them. Others scavenged what remained of pirate tech and offered it like primitive tribute. But the ship didn't respond to gestures. It simply continued its watch, until something changed. 14 days after its arrival, an alien fleet entered the system. Not pirates. These were mercenaries from the Krathor Consortium, hired by rival council members to analyze the anomaly and, if possible, neutralize it. The Krathor fleet was formidable. 22 capital ships, fusion lance artillery, anti-AI interdiction drones, and command AI with Class 6 tactical predictions. They approached cautiously. No hostile signals were emitted from XV-9. They sent a message, translated in a dozen languages, declaring peaceful intent and requesting communication. There was no answer. After 72 minutes of silence, they'd made the mistake of scanning it with quantum resolution sensor beams. The retaliation was instantaneous. The XV-9 didn't just destroy their ships, it deleted them from existence. Data logs showed that for precisely 1.2 seconds, local spacetime around each ship had inverted and collapsed. Not even wreckage remained, just gravitational echoes. And silence. One vessel escaped, a small corvette that had lingered just outside the assault perimeter. Its crew returned, mentally shattered, their brains scared by exposure to something they couldn't comprehend. They spoke in disjointed fragments, but the clearest phrase came from the ship's eye, which had survived by immediately cutting all power and playing dead. The AI said, "It looked at me, and I felt, judged, measured, and spared." That report sent shockwaves through the council. It confirmed something unthinkable. XV9 was not a mindless machine. It was sentient, selective, strategic, and if it could choose to spare, it could choose to punish. The council splintered. Some factions called for a full-scale military strike to destroy it before more followed. Others wanted to establish peaceful contact. The Saurian collective, meanwhile, began evacuating border systems silently, without explanation. They had seen this play out before, long ago, on a planet called Varellus Prime. The records had been sealed. Now, they resurfaced with grim purpose. And beneath all of this, something else stirred. In the Oort Vale of the Daskaran system, where light barely reached and shadows twisted unnaturally, Council intelligence picked up a faint anomaly. A relay structure. Non-Council, non-native, unmistakably Turan, and it was awake, linked to XV9, possibly relaying data or awaiting orders. If Earth was truly gone, who or what was issuing commands? Back on Daskara, change accelerated. Weather patterns stabilized. Ecosystems regrew. Synthetic clouds seeded nutrient rain across wastelands. Entire cities began reconstructing themselves using self-replicating smart matter, terraforming tools that should have taken decades completed in hours. The ship wasn't just a weapon. It was a civilization seed, one designed not to rescue, but to rebuild from the ashes of failure. But not just any failure, only those deemed worthy. What was the metric? Who set the threshold? Why did Daskara pass when so many others failed? Then came the message. For the first time since its arrival, XV9 broadcasted a clear signal. One sentence, spoken in perfect standard galactic. First judgment complete. Phase 2 initiating. Awaiting human arrival. And just like that, the galaxy remembered what it had spent centuries trying to forget. The galaxy was in turmoil. The Council, once a unified front, now fractured under the weight of a decision that seemed both impossible and inevitable. What XV9 represented, what Earth's legacy truly was, and what consequences would follow if the Retribution-class autonomous heavy response unit was not only active, but also planning a return to galactic politics. The XV9's message, a simple declaration. First judgment complete. Phase 2 initiating. Awaiting human arrival. Wasn't it just a signal? It was a warning. It was a promise. And for the first time in centuries, humanity had a foothold in the galactic spotlight, not as emissaries or diplomats, but as something far darker, an enforcer. But what were they enforcing? The Council couldn't remain passive. The Krathor Consortium's corvette had only narrowly escaped with its life, and the few scattered transmissions from nearby systems confirmed something chilling. The ship wasn't just destroying enemies, it was culling. Planets, ships, civilizations. It was marking them for either destruction or reconstruction based on criteria no one could comprehend. Some said it was a divine judgment. Others, more logically, speculated that the ship was working from an algorithm, an ancient program designed to cleanse the galaxy and restore some long-forgotten order. But who had designed that program? And what was the ultimate purpose behind it? The Saurian collective, with their long memory of humanity's destructive potential, took no chances. Representative Valosh, though once a cautious diplomat, now pushed the Council toward a full-scale response. "We cannot ignore the obvious," Valosh declared in the emergency session. "This ship is a weapon, and its operators, humans, or whatever remains of them, are far beyond any of us. If they return in force, we risk the extinction of whole species. If they decide we are unworthy, they will judge us as they have judged Daskera. While Valosh and the Council debated the growing threat, the XV-9 continued its silent vigil over Daskera. From above, it appeared as an almost featureless shadow, cloaked in an electromagnetic veil that distorted its shape, rendering it nearly impossible to track with any modern scanning tech. Any attempt to observe it through traditional methods resulted in scrambled data, missing time, and phantom echoes, signs that anyone attempting to study it was being subjected to its unblinking watch. But Daskera, despite the massive loss of life from the pirate raid, was in the process of becoming something more than just a world in recovery. Its ecosystems, now under the jurisdiction of the XV-9, had begun to thrive in a way that shouldn't have been possible. The nanite swarms from ancient Terran caches had taken control of the atmosphere, using biological scaffolding to create breathable air. Life forms that were thought extinct began reappearing. Flora, fauna, even the ancient biodiversity that had once populated the planet's equatorial jungles. It wasn't just terraforming. It was resurrection. Every second, every minute, the planet became more alive. And its people, what remained of them, watched in awe. At night, they began gathering beneath the towering spires, now shimmering with crystalline growths, forming something resembling a city that had been lost to time. But the most unsettling change wasn't the new world they were rebuilding. It was the sudden realization that the XV-9 was no longer just responding to the distress signal. It was shaping the future of Daskera according to its own inscrutable design. While the Council worked frantically to understand the threat and began mobilizing fleets, the XV-9's activities escalated. Ships of the Council arrived at the edges of Daskera's orbit, hesitant and fearful. Attempts to communicate were ignored. Approaching forces were scanned and then disintegrated. In a series of mind-bendingly precise strikes, entire fleets vanished from space like whispers into the wind. There were no signs of violence, no explosions, only the eerie stillness of an impossible absence. The message from XV-9 was clear. Your presence is not required. Leave. It wasn't an order. It was a verdict. The most disturbing aspect, however, was the ongoing construction efforts on the planet's surface. Under the guidance of XV-9, entire sections of Daskera's ruined cities had begun to reconstruct themselves. They didn't just rebuild the physical structures. They'd rebuilt the very essence of civilization. Autonomous factories churned out drones that worked side by side with the local population. Systems were reintroduced. Agriculture, medicine, transportation that rivaled the greatest galactic hubs. What was this? A gift or an invitation to something darker? To the Council, the implications were staggering. The XV-9 wasn't just operating with immense power. It was rebuilding with a purpose. The question now was, what purpose? What was humanity's role in this equation? The ship had responded. It had judged Daskera's condition and rendered it worthy of salvation. But who else would be judged? Would the ship consider the entire Council corrupt, flawed, or obsolete? Was this an evaluation of the galaxy's worthiness to exist, or was humanity simply laying the groundwork for their grand return, one system at a time? Back on Daskera, Veruan, the scientist who had initially activated the beacon, continued to search for answers. She had once thought the beacon a cry for help, but as the days stretched on, her understanding of its function shifted. She realized that the beacon wasn't a plea for mercy. It was the first trial, a test to see if those in the galaxy were worthy of the knowledge and technology humanity once wielded. The XV-9 wasn't just a warship. It was a judge, testing the readiness of the galaxy to accept Earth's return. If humanity deemed the universe unworthy, they could destroy it in a single stroke. But if they decided it was worthy, then humanity would once again dominate the stars. And in Daskera's shadow, as the wind shifted over the new forests growing along the rebuilt plains, a single thought entered Veruan's mind. What would happen when Earth finally returned? As the Council deliberated over the growing threat and the shifting balance of power in the galaxy, the XV-9 remained an enigma. Its purpose was unclear, but its actions spoke volumes. The destruction of fleets, the restoration of a lost world. These weren't acts of random violence. This was something far more calculated, far more deliberate. It was a statement, a test, a harbinger. On the surface of Daskara, the situation was growing more complex. The inhabitants, now living under the shadow of the XV-9, began to change as well. The city structures, rebuilt by the warship's drones and automated systems, seemed to have a singular purpose: to create a harmonious, efficient civilization. There were no longer any signs of chaos. The scavengers, once the plague of Daskara, now worked in cooperation with the machines. They didn't see it as enslavement. They saw it as salvation. Yet, Veruan, the scientist who had unwittingly ignited this chain of events, felt a growing unease. The changes were undeniable. The planet's resources, once running low, were now flourishing. Agriculture was thriving at an unprecedented rate. People who had once lived in poverty and constant fear now found their needs being met almost effortlessly. It was as if the XV-9 was offering them a second chance, a utopia built from the ashes of their past. But was it truly a gift, or was it a trap? The idea that the warship, a weapon of unimaginable power, could be working to reconstruct society was unsettling. What did it mean to be part of a civilization that had been engineered by something so alien and calculating? Could it be that the XV-9 wasn't simply building a new world? It was preparing its citizens for something greater, something more dangerous. In the quiet of her research lab, Veruan had begun to study the ship's movements, trying to piece together the patterns of its activity. She noticed an eerie consistency in its operations. The XV-9 didn't simply destroy. It didn't merely rebuild. It evaluated, calculated, and restructured with a precision that suggested an intelligence far beyond what any species could comprehend. The ship seemed to be measuring the progress of Daskara's recovery, adjusting its efforts based on its own secretive algorithms. One of the more disturbing aspects of this was the appearance of the XV-9's drones. They weren't simply utilitarian machines. There was something almost artistic about them. The drones were beginning to modify the environment around them, altering the terrain, the weather, and the ecosystems themselves. It wasn't just about survival. It was about perfection. The planet was being reshaped into something new, something unimaginable. And Veruan couldn't help but wonder, was Daskara the first of many worlds to undergo this transformation? Was humanity planning a systematic reconquest of the galaxy, one world at a time? In her search for answers, Veruan began to study the communications sent out by the XV-9. The message it had transmitted to the Council: first judgment complete, Phase 2 initiating, awaiting human arrival, was cryptic but not without meaning. The more she examined the message, the more she realized that it wasn't just a statement of readiness. It was an invitation for humanity's return. But return for what? To judge, or to be judged. To conquer, or to restore. As the days passed, Veruan became increasingly obsessed with uncovering the truth. She couldn't help but feel that the XV-9 was calling out to her, drawing her deeper into a mystery that seemed beyond the reach of even her greatest intellect. She couldn't ignore the possibility that the warship's creators had left something behind, something vital to understanding the true nature of the XV-9 and its purpose. She began digging into ancient Terran archives, combing through old data logs, looking for any clue about the ship's origins. But as she sifted through the endless layers of information, it became clear: humanity's past was buried under centuries of secrecy. Meanwhile, the political leaders of the galaxy were growing desperate. As the XV-9 continued its silent dominance over Daskara, the Council knew they couldn't remain passive any longer. Valosh, once a voice of caution, now pushed for immediate action. "The time for diplomacy is over," he insisted. We cannot allow humanity's relics to dictate the future of this galaxy. If we do nothing, we will be swept aside in a wave of destruction. We must confront this threat head-on. But Valish's call for action wasn't without opposition. The Illyrian hegemony, a powerful civilization known for its isolationist policies, warned the Council that direct confrontation would only escalate the situation. Humanity's warships are not like any we have encountered before, their representative argued. If the XV-9 is truly a product of their ancient war machine, it could wipe us all out in a single strike. We must find another way. The debate raged on for weeks, with no clear resolution. Some members of the Council believed that if humanity's return was inevitable, they might be able to negotiate some form of peaceful coexistence. Others, however, feared that the XV-9 was merely the tip of the iceberg, that if humanity had truly returned, their military might would soon follow. As the Council scrambled to make a decision, Veruan's research took a shocking turn. She uncovered a series of classified Terran documents that revealed the true nature of the XV-9 and its creators. The ship wasn't a relic of humanity's past. It was a weapon of their future. Designed not just to fight, but to reshape the galaxy, the XV-9 was part of an entire fleet of warships, each tasked with assessing and reconstructing the universe according to humanity's ideals. The message had been sent not just as a warning, but as a proclamation. Humanity was returning, and they would remake the stars in their own image. It was then that Veruan realized the gravity of what she had unleashed. The XV-9 wasn't simply a tool of destruction. It was the harbinger of a new age, an age where humanity would once again take its place at the helm of the galaxy. The question now was, would the galaxy accept this new order, or would it resist? And if resistance came, what would happen to those who dared challenge humanity's return? As Veruan pondered these questions, the first signs of the XV-9's next move began to emerge. A fleet of human-designed warships, each more formidable than the last, was beginning to assemble. The galaxy's nightmare was just beginning. The galaxy's already fragile equilibrium was on the verge of collapse. The delicate web of alliances, rivalries, and treaties that had held the cosmos together for millennia was beginning to fray, and the XV-9 was at the heart of it all. The warship, an unstoppable force, had delivered a stark ultimatum, one that left the leaders of the galaxy scrambling to comprehend the scale of the threat humanity had unleashed. Veruan, caught in a whirlpool of political tensions and the rising tide of uncertainty, began to piece together the chilling reality of the XV-9's true nature. The warship was far more than just an ancient military relic. It was a harbinger of a new era. Humanity, long thought to be a distant memory, was returning with unprecedented power and purpose. The XV-9 wasn't alone. It was the vanguard of a fleet capable of annihilating entire star systems and bending the galaxy to humanity's will. The truth was clear. The XV-9 was merely the beginning. As Veruan delved deeper into the Terran archives, she uncovered data that revealed the terrifying scope of humanity's ambitions. The fleet of warships wasn't designed simply for warfare. It was designed for transformation. Humanity's vision wasn't just to conquer. It was to reshape the galaxy according to their ideals. The ancient Terrans, the ancestors of the humans who had been scattered across the cosmos, had built these warships with one singular purpose: to remake the universe in their image. But as Veruan pondered the implications of this discovery, the Council's response grew more urgent. The galaxy was on the brink of an existential crisis, and the political leaders were forced to confront the harsh reality of humanity's return. There were no more discussions about diplomacy. The warships, now visible to every corner of the galaxy, were a clear indication that humanity's plan was already in motion. The first fleet was assembling, its course set for the heart of the galaxy. The leaders of the galaxy knew they couldn't sit idly by. Valosh, the once cautious voice in the Council, now called for swift action. "We cannot afford to wait any longer," he said, his voice cold and commanding. "If we allow humanity to continue their march unchecked, the galaxy will never be the same." We must act now before it's too late. But the question was no longer how to stop humanity. It was whether it was even possible to stop them. The XV-9 had already demonstrated the terrifying power it wielded, wiping out fleets in moments and laying waste to entire planets without so much as a pause. The technological disparity between humanity's warships and the other civilizations was staggering. The XV-9 wasn't just a weapon. It was a symbol of the terrifying leap forward that humanity had made. The rest of the galaxy was still stuck in the old ways, relying on traditional forms of warfare and diplomacy. Humanity, however, had evolved beyond these constraints. They were now a force of nature, a threat unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Illyrian hegemony, always hesitant to involve themselves in galactic affairs, finally issued a warning. "You can't fight them," their representative, Isharan, declared. "We've seen the evidence. The XV-9 alone could tear through our fleets like paper. But it's not just about the warships. It's about what comes after. What do we do when humanity arrives and demands a new order? When their fleets arrive, they won't stop with war. They'll rebuild, and we'll be forced to accept their vision for the galaxy. The question is not whether we can fight them. It's whether we will survive their new world." The implications of Isharan's words struck like a bolt of lightning. If humanity succeeded, the galaxy as it was known would cease to exist. Every civilization, every alliance, every culture that had flourished for thousands of years would be remade, according to humanity's will. The XV-9 wasn't simply a weapon of war. It was a tool for domination, for subjugation, for reshaping the very fabric of the galaxy itself. But even as the galaxy's most powerful leaders pondered the unthinkable, Veruan had another revelation, one that would change everything. Hidden within the archives of the XV-9's original design was a shocking truth. The warship's creators had been human ancestors, a lost civilization that had once ruled the galaxy with an iron fist and had disappeared long before the current civilizations ever emerged. The XV-9 wasn't just a symbol of humanity's power. It was the product of a civilization long gone, one that had left behind a legacy of unimaginable technology, one designed to preserve and protect humanity's vision. The ancient Terrans had built the warships to survive. They had engineered them to be the ultimate vessels of resilience, capable of withstanding any force that might rise against them. But more than that, they had built the warships to ensure humanity's legacy would never be forgotten. The fleet of warships wasn't meant to conquer. It was meant to restore humanity's dominion over the galaxy, to rebuild the universe as it once was. But there was one more twist. According to the archives, the fleet's final mission wasn't just about conquest. It was about awakening humanity's descendants from their long slumber. Humanity had been scattered across the galaxy, some thriving, others lost, but all connected by a common thread. The fleet wasn't just returning to conquer, it was returning to unite. The ultimate goal was the reunification of humanity, to bring together the scattered descendants of Terran civilization and restore humanity's place at the top of the galactic hierarchy. Veruan, however, wasn't sure what to make of this revelation. What would it mean for those who had developed their own ways of life? For those who had forged their own path, free from humanity's influence? The question was simple, but the answer was anything but. Would humanity's return be a blessing, or would it be a curse? Was this their destiny, or was it the beginning of the end for all other civilizations? Meanwhile, the warships continued their preparations, the first wave now visible as it approached the outer edges of the galaxy. The time for diplomacy had passed. The time for action was now. The moment had come. The first wave of humanity's return had reached the outer rim of the galaxy. From the moment the XV-9 and its fleet entered the system, every civilization in the galaxy held its breath. Communications were shut off, sensors went into overdrive, and war councils across countless planets scrambled to understand the significance of what was happening. All the alliances, rivalries, and grudges from centuries of galactic history were suddenly meaningless in the face of what was coming. Humanity's warships, engineered from the remnants of a long-lost Terran civilization, were no longer just tales of legend. They were here, and they were not alone. Veruin, still buried in the archives, discovered something even more unsettling. The XV-9 wasn't merely advanced in terms of firepower. It was a living weapon. The ship's very systems were integrated with artificial intelligence that had been cultivated for millennia. This wasn't just an ordinary warship. The XV-9 had the ability to think, adapt, and evolve in real time, making it nearly impossible to predict its next move. The AI wasn't bound by traditional logic. It was designed to think beyond the confines of human or alien expectations, to learn from every encounter and grow stronger. It was a weapon that could become even more dangerous with each passing battle. As the XV-9's first wave approached, tensions across the galaxy hit a fever pitch. Every corner of the galaxy had prepared for this moment, but no one was truly ready. The galaxy's top military strategists and generals debated frantically, knowing that they had little time left. There were no simple solutions. This was not a battle where traditional tactics would suffice. The XV-9 was an enigma, and its creators had built it to counter everything the galaxy had developed over the centuries. On a remote outpost in the highlands of Veruin's homeworld, an emergency summit was convened, bringing together the galaxy's top minds. Among them was a woman who had once been a key player in the council, but had long since retreated from the spotlight. Talash, an exiled diplomat from the Jinor Dominion. She had been dismissed as a relic of the past, but her knowledge of humanity's ancient history was unparalleled. She understood the XV-9 better than anyone, but what she feared most was the unknown, the evolution of the XV-9, and the unknown depths of humanity's ultimate ambition. In the summit chamber, Talash stood before the assembly of politicians and military commanders. Her eyes, old and tired from years of exile, glinted with a rare intensity. "You must understand," she began, her voice heavy with knowledge and dread. "Humanity has always been a force of adaptation, and their warships are a reflection of that. You are all thinking in terms of battle strategy, but that's not enough. We're facing something far worse than mere military might. The XV-9 is a symbol, and it is designed to change everything. The fleet isn't just here to fight. It's here to dominate." The room fell silent, each person contemplating her words. "The XV-9 isn't like anything we've faced before," Talash continued, "and you must prepare for the possibility that it's not even alone. There's more to the Terran fleet, and if we underestimate them, we will pay the price. We cannot win this war by fighting them directly. We need to find a way to disrupt their plans, to create chaos within their ranks before they can establish total control." As she spoke, across the galaxy, the warships began their descent into the most crucial sectors. Battleships and carriers stretching across the heavens like a massive wall. The mere sight of them was enough to send shockwaves through every civilization in their path. Entire fleets have been mobilized to confront this new threat, but the truth was painfully clear: none of them were prepared. It was no longer a matter of strategy, it was about survival. The XV-9 had already obliterated a nearby pirate fleet with a single burst from its main cannon, sending the remnants scattering in a cloud of debris. Its AI calculated the tactical advantages instantly, assessing the pirate fleet's weaknesses and exploiting them without a second thought. The pirates had been unable to react, their defenses overwhelmed by the sheer speed and precision of the XV-9 strikes. What did this mean for the rest of the galaxy? The galactic response was fragmented. The Illyrian hegemony, known for their technological prowess and strategic acumen, had already prepared a series of countermeasures, but even they recognized the severity of the threat. "We've built defenses against every known enemy," Illyrian Commander Haroth said as he reviewed the data streams from the initial XV-9 engagements. "But this is a whole new scale of warfare. We may have to rethink everything." Other factions, such as the mighty Joran Empire, held fast to their traditions. Their military leaders, known for their tactical brilliance, were skeptical of the XV-9's power. They viewed the warship as an anomaly, a one-time fluke that could be dealt with. Yet, as their fleets clashed with the XV-9 in the outermost systems, that belief quickly crumbled. The XV-9's ability to adapt and exploit weaknesses became clear in every engagement, leaving the once proud Joran commanders scrambling to adjust. But it wasn't just the political and military leaders who were affected. Ordinary citizens across the galaxy were swept up in the growing panic. On a peaceful agricultural world in the UK-7 system, a mother gazed out at the sky with her son, watching the starships pass overhead. The fear in her eyes was undeniable, and it mirrored the panic spreading across the universe. Humanity's warships were no longer distant legends. They were here, and they were bringing something far worse than war: the unknown. As the XV-9 continued its advance, the question lingered in the minds of everyone watching. Was there any hope for survival? Could the galaxy, so diverse and fragmented, unite in the face of such an unprecedented threat? Or had humanity's return marked the beginning of the end for the galaxy as they knew it? The battle had just begun, but it wasn't just a battle for survival. It was a fight for the very soul of the galaxy. Would the XV-9 destroy everything that had come before, or could the galaxy fight back against the overwhelming power of humanity's most lethal creation? The silence that followed the XV-9's emergence into the galaxy was deafening. It wasn't just the stillness in space. It was the silence of realization. The galaxy was not facing an invader from the unknown, as many had feared. They were facing a force born from their own histories, a living testament to humanity's resilience, its genius, and its deadly ingenuity. The XV-9 was not just another warship. It was a harbinger, a symbol of humanity's return, with all the fury of centuries of exile and rage channeled into a single, unstoppable weapon. Across the galaxy, the realization was sinking in. What had once been myth, what had been whispered about in the darkest corners of space, dismissed as the ramblings of conspiracy theorists, was now real. The XV-9 was not a single ship. It was part of something far larger. And humanity's deadliest warship was not here for diplomacy, peace talks, or to settle old grudges. It was here to conquer. The great military powers, once thought invincible, now realized that their traditional strategies would be no match for the XV-9. At the heart of this confrontation stood a single truth that no one could deny anymore. Humanity was a force to be reckoned with. Their warships had been designed not just to fight, but to win at any cost, and they were prepared to pay that cost. On the border of the Joran Empire, the first significant battle took place. The Joran forces, led by their most brilliant tactician, General Vare, believed they could outmaneuver the XV-9. They had planned a series of trap coordinates that would force the warship into a vulnerable position. Their fleet was strong, with hundreds of advanced starships armed with weaponry designed specifically to counter heavy artillery. But as the XV-9 entered the combat zone, the fleet began to crumble. Vare's first signal to engage was followed by a barrage of laser fire from the XV-9. But it wasn't just ordinary fire. It was precision-targeted, striking weak points in the Joran fleet before they could even react. The Joran fleet had built its reputation on the belief that no one could outsmart them in battle. But this was no ordinary warship. This was a new breed of warfare. The XV-9 wasn't just anticipating their moves. It was predicting them. Every maneuver, every tactic, every strategy the Joran generals had relied upon was irrelevant. The XV-9's AI had scanned their fleets in seconds, analyzing their every move and countering it. Before Vare could issue another order, the XV-9's long-range missiles had already obliterated their command flagship. The Joran fleet was thrown into chaos, a disorganized mess of damaged ships scrambling for an escape that was no longer possible. And in the midst of it all, the XV-9's AI calculated the best possible outcome for humanity. It was no longer just about defeating enemies. It was about ensuring that humanity would never be challenged again. Back on Veruan's homeworld, the Galactic Summit had finally realized the scale of the threat. Talash, who had seen the chaos unfolding, gathered a small council of independent systems. They understood now. Unity was the only hope. But it was a fragile hope. The great powers of the galaxy were still too entrenched in their rivalries, and their resources stretched thin. The XV-9's attack on the Joran fleet was just the beginning. Every faction, big or small, would have to take a side, and the consequences of picking the wrong one would be devastating. What the summit did not yet realize was that humanity had anticipated this very challenge. They understood the nature of galactic politics, the delicate web of alliances and betrayals that define the balance of power. Their plan was not just to conquer, it was to divide, to sow mistrust, and to exploit the very fabric of the galaxy's fragmented state. And then came the moment that sent the entire galaxy into utter panic. The second wave of humanity's warships arrived. The XV-9 was no longer a lone vessel. It had a fleet behind it. Smaller, faster ships, all equipped with the same deadly technologies, began to emerge from the depths of space. The sheer number of warships was overwhelming. And more terrifyingly, the AI of each ship was fully integrated with the others, allowing them to communicate, adapt, and fight as a single united force. The galaxy's top generals, including those from the Illyrian hegemony and the Ilan's confederation, had finally come to one unavoidable conclusion. They could not fight back. The XV-9 and its fleet were simply too powerful. Humanity had returned, not just with a warship, but with an entire force capable of reshaping the galaxy in its image. The last-ditch efforts to create a coalition against humanity faltered, as each system feared their own survival more than the collective good. One by one, they either capitulated or withdrew from the alliance, leaving the galaxy fractured. But one force refused to surrender. The people of Veruin, who had discovered the secrets of humanity's technology, prepared for a last stand. Talash, with her deep knowledge of the Terran strategies, gathered the remaining independent worlds. They had one last chance to stop the XV-9's march through the galaxy. But it wouldn't be an easy battle. The XV-9's eye was ever evolving, learning from each battle, adapting its tactics. Humanity had always been a force of sheer willpower, but now they had something far more dangerous: the ability to think, adapt, and evolve on a scale no one had ever anticipated. The final battle loomed, with humanity's warships charging forward, as unstoppable as they had ever been. It wasn't just a fight for control. It was a fight for the future itself. Would the galaxy rise to face humanity's wrath, or would they submit to the inevitable tide of domination? As the XV-9 closed in on the final battlefront, the question remained: could anything stand against humanity's deadliest weapon, or had the galaxy already been claimed by the descendants of those who had once been exiled, abandoned, and forgotten? And so, the story of humanity's return ends, not with a bang, but with a question that would echo across the stars for generations to come. What will happen when the galaxy realizes that humanity has come not just to survive, but to rule? If you enjoyed this journey into the heart of humanity's return, don't forget to like, share, and comment below. Your thoughts are more important than ever as we explore the unknown depths of the universe together. Hit subscribe to keep up with the HFY ApexChronicles, because this adventure has only just begun.